Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that hope to help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid. I'm here with my UBI, Universal Basic Income co-hosts, Diane Blackwell and Enno Schmidt. Welcome, guys. And we have two very special guests with us. Diane Pagen, who is working with the Income Movement org, and she's a co-founder of the local UBI March and Rally that we're going to hear about during the show. And also Stacey Rutland, who is zooming in from Portland, Oregon. She's the Income Movement Organization founder. Welcome, guys and ladies.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Okay. Diane, you've been on the show before and kind of familiar with some of what we do here. If you could tell us a little bit about, we've talked about the rally. I think it's coming up in October, if I'm not mistaken. Give us a little bit of background about that. That's something that's going to happen here in the New York area. Tell us a little bit about that and your work, if you could.
Sure. So actually, September is the month of the rally. The name of the event is the Basic Income Celebration. So it's the third annual Basic Income March, and I'm one of the New York City organizers. We have a great team of about a half dozen people who are working arduously on organizing the march, and we've once again chosen Harlem to do the march. We love Harlem, right, Stacey? And
absolutely.
Yeah, we had a spectacular first march in 2019 that went from Harlem to the Bronx. And, we felt that it was very important to come back to the area and make sure that the community that would most benefit from a basic income could have an opportunity to be with us for the event. So we can certainly answer more specific questions. I think that you had mentioned to give a little bit of background about, maybe it would make sense about what I do. So the way that I came to basic income was I've been a social worker since 2004, and I came around fairly quickly, even though I didn't know that.
Diane just froze. Diane, if you hear us, you froze in temporarily. Maybe you can pick up on what she was talking about, Stacey, and give a little bit of background. We just kind of jumped right into the march, but give just a little bit of background on UBI and the significance of the march, if you would.
Sure. Yeah. So Income Movement is an organization that's working across the United States. It's a national organization working to make a federal basic income our reality. We really are hoping that this is the decade that we're going to be able to make this happen. And so we work specifically, when you think about movement building, there's several different kind of pillars or areas where people need to be kind of pushing the force forward. Some are on the political and policy side, some are on the education and thought leadership side, and then some on the grassroots and advocacy. And where our area of focus is, Income Movement's area of focus is specifically on grassroots and advocacy and thought leadership and education. So we aren't deep in the policy space. We're not helping design what a basic income policy should look like, though we work in deep partnership with organizations like Economic Security Project and Humanity Forward, who are doing that work and have lobbyists on the Hill who are forging those relationships and socializing the idea across our elected, kind of federally elected officials. We believe very deeply that it's important to actually keep politics and policy separate from grassroots advocacy, because sometimes there's a natural inherent tension between those two things. What the people might be demanding may look different than what the policy that are, gets written and what it looks like. And we need to be able to challenge that as a community, be able to demand and push our elected officials to do the best that they possibly can, and to be able to advocate for our communities in the way that we think is most impactful. So we work with organizations that are in that space to make sure that when it's appropriate, and there's opportunities for us to come together and think about the larger movement roadmap, and opportunities for partnership or coordination around certain initiatives, we do that work. But ultimately, income movement is all about people and making sure that that people are really at the center of this movement, and that the voices and stories and experiences on the ground are what's helping inform the design of policy and the work that's happening on the political sphere. So the Basic Income March is a really key and important event. It's our one signature, it's really a global event that happens annually. We have intentionally partnered with BIEN and the international community to have the march be on the final Saturday of the International Week of Basic Income. So I think the International Week of Basic Income is on their 11th or 12th annual cycle. So they've been doing it for quite a while. And so when we started to think about doing a Basic Income March, we felt like aligning with amazing existing work that's been happening globally would be an important way for us to continue to grow the movement here, but also to collectively be growing this movement across the globe. So the International Week of Basic Income kicks off on the 20th of September and culminates on the 26th. That's Monday to Sunday, and the march lands on the 25th, which is Saturday. Right now we have in 2019 we had about 30 cities across the globe participate. Last year under COVID we actually had more cities. We had 40 cities participate, but these tended to look different than a classic march or rally. They were car parades, bike parades, street corner protests, things that allowed for social distancing, but still had people getting out physically in the streets to have to advocate for basic income in their communities, which is really ultimately the goal, one of the core goals of the Basic Income March. There's kind of a couple of key things. One, it's an annual event that our community can rely on year in and year out. It's a time to celebrate the growth and the progress that we've made. It's also a time to get out into our communities and help our communities know that we are fighting and advocating for them on this, specifically on kind of the economic justice side of things. And it's also an opportunity for us to start to lay out the vision for what the next year will look like. So it's like celebration, inspiration, and then let's roll up our sleeves and start getting ready to do the next stage of work together. So this year we have, I think it's almost 30 cities right now who are organizing events across the globe. 22 or 23 of those are here in the United States. New York is one of those. New York is and will continue to be our kind of primary March event. It's the one that Income Movement is deeply involved in helping organize, and helping wonderful organizers like Diane and Diana on the ground, the work that they're doing to bring together their community. Income Movement is right there next to them, helping make sure that we're shouldering the work and helping with kind of strategy and introductions for speakers and all of those kinds of things, so that it can be an amazing event, because New York absolutely has a thriving, very exciting and very engaged basic income community.
Mm-hmm. You talk about grassroots, Stacey, and in your last comment you said that the folks are very engaged. Tell us a little bit about the reaction, folks on the ground. What are you hearing? What's it feel like talking to people, and what's their sense of the movement and the whole notion of UBI?
So UBI, what's interesting is, since in the United States, and I think this has actually happened globally, but probably is the progress might be most significant in the United States. The pandemic has brought really very frank conversations to the forefront around how our economy functions, the precarity of our economy, and the impact of that precarity on everyday people on the ground, families, students, children, grandparents, workers, non-workers, disabled, all the wide range of people that make up our very diverse communities, starting to understand the impact of when things go wrong, who pays the price? And when things are technically going right, who's still paying the price, right? I think that a lot of those conversations have started to become primary during the pandemic. And in the United States, for the first time, there's been a shift on the political front of recognizing that there's value in direct cash programs. It's the first time that multiple stimulus checks have gone out to people. There's also been some of the standard ways that the political infrastructure decides to help bail people out, and usually it's not people, it's banks and corporations, and that continued during the pandemic as well. But this really was one of the first times in a long time where there was a significant shift towards recognizing that direct cash was important. And what that has done on the ground with the larger grassroots community is it's given us fuel to be able to point to the successes. In many ways, at the same time that there's been direct cash being distributed by our federal government, there's also been a rise in basic income pilots. Most of those pilots are not universal basic income pilots. They're guaranteed income pilots. They're targeted. There's usually means testing involved and who's going to participate in those. But what's happened is there's more of a conversation about the dignity of cash, the importance of cash, the value of cash, certainly in moments of pandemic and moments of economic crisis. But it's given us an opportunity to explore more deeply some of the most important parts of our conversations around universal basic income, which is the inherent dignity of cash and the indignity of most other social programs, the hoops that people are required to jump through, the difficulty in actually being able to access the support in the ways that it's at least theoretically intended to, et cetera. And I think that it's become easier to have those conversations. It's been easier to have, the stimulus checks, we could say to a certain degree, is almost like a massive direct cash pilot. There's so much data coming out about the value and importance of those stimulus checks on local economies, on national economies, on households. And now we have the child tax credit that was part of the American Rescue Plan, where families are receiving a monthly check in support of their children, which is basically a guaranteed income for kids. We're now having millions and millions of people receiving this money, and we're seeing immediately the result of that, childhood hunger greatly decreasing, and the ability for parents to be able to buy school supplies for their kids as they're going into school. All of these things are really helping us make the case for and helping us point to real deep impact across at a quantitative level, large data, but also at a qualitative. We're hearing the stories of what that means for a single mom of 3 in Harlem, what it means that she's now receiving $750 a month to help cover her her and her children's basic needs. And that's a huge opportunity for us to have real conversations with people, and the receptiveness of people when advocates are out on the streets having these conversations. The receptiveness certainly has increased significantly over the last year and a half. It doesn't feel like a utopian ideal. It feels like a necessity for a lot of people. When you start to talk about it, it makes sense. There's still a lot to do, a lot to unpack, a lot of the narratives to help people unlearn around, the most common kind of arguments that are, people need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. It's a level playing field out there. Hard work gets, reaps equal benefits. Some of those kinds of things that those tropes that people fall into that we know aren't true. We still have to help unpack some of those things. There's still people who are holding tight to that because it's a very comfortable for some people place to be. We still have to work against some of the ideas that if you give people money, they're going to be lazy. It's a disincentivization for work. Certainly some of the stuff that's come out with unemployment insurance has stoked some of those fires. And we have to do our work to remind people that unemployment insurance is work dependent and basic income is not. And that's actually an important differentiate. Like if people were getting basic income, they would still be going to work. That's all of the data points to that. And people wouldn't choose not to work for fear of losing it, which is how unemployment insurance has been set up. And so, there's a little bit of complications and more difficulty in teasing apart people's reactions to direct cash because some of it's all getting glommed together in their minds. But ultimately, it's a much more, it's an easier conversation to have with people because people have been confronting the economy in very real ways, and ways that they haven't had to, that many people haven't had to historically. That was very long-winded. I apologize.
Yeah, but that was good. Diane Pagen is back with us.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I wanted to hear from both you and Diana Blackwell about the same question, really. What are you hearing from folks on the ground? Stacey's in Portland, Oregon. I know she travels and gets around, so she hears from folks all over the globe. But I'm wondering, Diana Blackwell, what you're hearing from folks in Harlem, and Diane Pagen, what are you hearing from folks on the ground? Are regular folks starting to embrace UBI, and what are you hearing?
Well, I can tell you right now, what I'm hearing is still questions because this is still new to our area. We're talking about being one-on-one. Like I said, is my mentor. So I'm just repeating what he's saying and I'm trying to apply it to everyday life, but it's still questionable. So I'm going to turn it over to Diane.
I would say that for quite a while now, particularly during COVID, people are seeing, the people who stand to most benefit from a non-means tested direct cash transfer. You don't need to explain to them why cash is superior to whatever program they're struggling to make work for them right now. That's always been, as a social worker, I've always found that poor people understand cash very, very well. And in fact, they can teach me about it and did teach me about it on multiple occasions. And so I do think, though, that in the past couple of years, I would say from about like 2015 on, you're starting to see more people realize that not only is cash superior, but that we have to get organized to make it happen, that no one is going to make it happen for us, particularly not people who have enough of it, which would be many legislators and people who are part of the establishment. They may already have enough, so they don't need to push very hard because it's not a matter of survival for them. They'll always have enough. And those who have significant assets have even less reason to feel the urge, what they call a fierce urgency of now, right? I don't know who said that, but someone said it, and it's true. So I think that it's been really interesting during COVID times to notice that non-cash systems break down in disasters. And that's one of the things that this whole period of COVID has brought us, is the realization that cash is the superior way to make sure that people survive and get what they need in a disaster. And we've always known this, right? So like for example, whenever there's like a typhoon or a hurricane, people, what do all of the not-for-profits say? They say, please don't send stuff to Haiti or to wherever there's, please don't like pay to pack up stuff, because it creates a second disaster. It creates a need to figure out who needs water versus who needs medicine, who needs clothing. It's a logistical nightmare to try to decide for poor people which non-cash thing they need. It's much more expedient to just get people the cash and let them figure it out for themselves. And they know better than anyone what they need. And so now COVID has taught people who didn't have, it was a real lesson. People who had never been part of a disaster and experienced, the glut of goods that nobody can use during a disaster. Now we know.
Cash allows you to tap into the existing pipelines of the market, which are pretty effective in moving goods, right? I mean, it's ultimately what Diane is saying is like, and obviously there's, when it comes to something like the horrific devastation in Haiti, both now and many years ago, like there's an issue just getting stuff into a situation like that, period, goods in any kind of way. But I think that in a lot of the situations that we see now, that yes, the direct cash, when is the way to make it so that you're not, it also makes it so that it's a more significant percentage of the funding is going directly into the hands of people. It requires less administrative overhead. It requires, just a lot less people trying to coordinate and figure out and problem solve, and more, and especially nowadays with the way that our infrastructure is set up around banking and cash, it's never been easier to move money around from account to account. And so those are things that are certainly important. I do want to say one thing though, just to validate what Diana is saying, that there's a lot of questions around this. I think that when the Stockton economic empowerment demonstration, what's called SEED, that pilot that happened, it's one of the first pilots that happened, guaranteed income pilots that happened in the United States. When that happened, one of the most important components that the organizers of that demonstration talked about was the importance of having social workers on the ground helping build trust with the community. And I think that we cannot underemphasize, or we can't overemphasize how much of a breakdown there is right now in trust between our community and our government and community and programs. And so a lot of, even people who were receiving, who became a participant in the SEED pilot, even after they'd received checks for 5-6 months, were like, I still don't really totally trust that it's going to be there next month. I've never had anything work for me effectively in this way, and so I think that those are some really important pieces. You can talk to people who have been systematically, consistently, and generationally disenfranchised, marginalized, demonized, all of, if they've been having all of these incredibly negative experiences to systems, and saying those systems are not for me. Not only are they not for me, they actively work against me. To say, hey, there's this thing called universal basic income, and guess what? It really can be the reaction can be like, yeah, right. What's in it for them? Are they going to be collecting my data? Am I going to have to do something specific to be able to jump through hoops? Am I, can they pull it at any time when they decide that I'm no longer somebody who should receive it? It's hard for them to fathom a program that actually is about their dignity and their autonomy. And that's a steep hill to climb. It's a very steep hill to climb with huge portions of our community when it comes to just having conversations about this idea.
Well, can I just say that two things I found out is that they want to know, what do they have to do to get this money, keep this money? And then the other school of thought is, this is what we should do with it. So it's a control factor in it. And if I can understanding from, it's totally free. There's no condition. Am I correct, There's no condition with it. It's whether you receive it.
Okay. There is a consideration or some threat that you can misuse an unconditional basic income. So it is unconditional, that's fine. But for example, if you look to China and the control system there, and you can imagine, and this is in the debate in China, to implement something like a basic income, and you can call it unconditional, whatever, but then use it to steer the people, to give credit points or negative points or whatever. So in this society we live in, you can have a careful look that the idea of a UBI is not misused by separating society, by controlling the people, and so on and so on. So those forces which are responsible for the situation that you just very, very clearly made up as a picture, those forces are still alive and they will with us. And so we have to be careful to save the basic income idea, the universal unconditional basic income idea, from misusing it. That's just what I said. The idea is unconditional. It's no condition and no control, of course.
Okay, I just want to say that you're listening to Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM. We are doing our special monthly show on unconditional basic income with my co-host Diane Blackwell and Enno Schmidt. And we have special guests with us, Stacey Rutland and Diane Pagen. And we're talking about UBI and reaction on the ground, of which has been both positive and negative. And just kind of following up on what you just said, I know you have spoken in the past about how you didn't think that some of the stimulus programs here in the U.S. and the child care subsidies, you didn't think that really qualified as UBI, and I guess that's related to the conditionality of it. So I just wanted you to talk about that just a little bit more so our viewers and listeners can understand the difference.
Yeah, yes, of course. It's like Stacey said, the pilot project, for example, in Stockton and others too, are not really unconditional universal basic incomes. They are for a specific section of the population. They are means tested. They are for a limited period of time and so on and so on. But all those things, also you mentioned, Stu, are going in the direction. So on the one hand, the very practical need of cash is arising. It's not an ideology, it's not an ideal, it's just the need forces us to do that. And on the other hand, there is this very high idea of we are all equal, we are all humans, and everybody in the society deserves the right to live. And if you have a closer look, an income is the right to live. Everything else is blah, blah, blah. So it's just written in a book. The right to live is given with an income, because then you have the right to take from other people what you need. And we have to understand so many things by this idea of an unconditional basic income. So first, that we are all human beings, and in this we are equal. So this is a basic idea of the United States, for example. Your base is this idea. Human rights is the same idea. So that's no wonder that in the United States, after a while, they came a bit late, but then they came this force, and that's typical US. And this is because you're based on this idea. So the one is the practical reasons and the need of so many people, in particular in the United States. It's unbelievable. The very rich, the very poor, and millions of those. So it's a third world country, it's underdeveloped, and it's the most technical and most intelligent and whatever. And so this makes it very exciting, but also very horrible for so many people. And so the practical reason, give a help to the poor, is very strong and urgent, absolutely urgent for the society. In the same way, like people said that slavery is poisoning the country, and that was a reason to abolish slavery. It's poisoning the whole country. And this poverty in the United States today, it's poisoning the country. It is absolutely unbearable. It has to be ended up immediately. And this idea of an unconditional basic income gives or drops in the idea of giving cash, giving it unconditional. And that's a new point in it. So this is a practical, urgent part of the universal basic income. And the other is, you can call it the philosophical, but I don't think it's philosophical, or everybody is a philosopher. That is to rethink so many things. So for example, what work is, that's always what I try to explain. If you look to you yourself, check it with yourself. Your work is working for others, doing good things for others. And that's the same for everybody. So Stu isn't doing that just for himself, but for the audience, and the ideas can change. We are all doing things for others, whatever the work is. So being consequent by your own awareness of what work is, in fact, factually, not ideologically, then you see we are living in a social world. We are taking care of each other globally. But the ideology is now everything is for profit for the owners of the industries, of the institutions, of the companies, and so on. So this is an unconditional basic income helps to cover up that work is what I am doing with my life in society for others, or for the animals, or for the planet Earth, or for a piece of art which isn't created yet, whatever, but it's always for other. So work is not egoism, and income and work has to be seen apart. Income is that you can buy what other people are doing for you. They are providing you. Nobody is self-sufficient. Nobody is providing for themselves, because we are all doing things for others. And if you think about that, it opens up a different mood, a different horizon of how society factual is in which we live, and how we are taught to think about it. We are forced to think, well, everything is for egoism, everything is just for profit for me. I do things because I take the profit for me, and that is a disease. That's schizophrenia. You know, and this is the other side of basic income for me, that it is the enlightenment of the 21st century, which we need parallel to the fourth industrial revolution and digitization and all that stuff what is coming. So there are many lines of the basic income, and I just wanted to point out that there is one practically immediately give help to the people, and the other hopefully immediately rethink society, rethink education, rethink work, what economy is in fact, and not by ideology. So this is a revolution, and that comes from the unconditional. That comes from, it is for everybody, also for the rich, also for those I really don't like, you know. And this is a challenge. This is the challenge of your heart, your soul, your intellect, You have to leave correct meanings behind you and look and trust your own awareness, trust your perception, trust your own thinking, trust your heart, and so on and so on. This is the broader field of progress. But of course, there is also, and very urgent necessary, that the progress for those who are in bitter hardship. And so it's not a contradiction of this and that and that. And so I appreciate very much all the people who are fighting for a universal basic income, whether it is in this or that direction. But the whole is, the simple idea is for everybody unconditional, just the basic, to live without hardship. It's not like social benefits that says to the people and make evidence, you have to take a paid job again, so you are punished more or less by being poor because we don't want you to get social benefit. Unconditional basic income is no social benefit, and not in that way. It is just the appreciation of your being and being member of the society we are living in, the community which are ruled by ourselves. So that's democracy, for example. It's also to rethink democracy, and so on and so on.
Okay. I want to ask Stacey a question based on something that you said. Stacey, please, how would you explain this child tax credit based on what you just heard Enno say? Because what it is a government funded project, which really doesn't have a condition except it's to be used for the children.
It doesn't have to be used for the kids. I mean, the children is one of the factors. You know, that is one of the. So there's two pieces to the child tax credit. One is the requirement to have a child, and then the second is it is means tested. So it starts to phase out at a certain, if you're making above a certain amount of income. The phase out is pretty. It's a pretty long phase out. So even a household that's making like up to like $350, almost $400,000 is still receiving some part of that. So it actually goes to the vast majority of parents in our society. Really, ultimately, the child tax credit is a guaranteed income for kids, is how we talk. Guaranteed income means that it's means tested. That's, you know, one of the kind of core differentiators between universal and guaranteed income is guaranteed income generally has some core means testing, some core income thresholds that are associated with it to go out versus you know, universal goes to everybody regardless. So it's guaranteed income for kids, and once the money is dropped into parents' bank accounts, or, you know, the check is received, parents can do whatever they want with it. They could buy alcohol with it. They could, you know, gamble it away. They can do whatever they want. They can go on vacation with it. There's no strings attached to how they use it. And what's fundamental, what's an important key shift beside, you know, the child tax credit has existed, as well as the earned income tax credit. These are both tax credits that have existed, you know, historically for the last, and they're different amounts of time, but let's just say for the last, you know, decade or so, two or longer in some cases, but these have existed. What happened with the child tax credit and the expanded earned income tax credit that was part of the American Rescue Plan that happened under the Biden administration, and is that two things. One, it expanded. Most of these tax credits were not available to people who made less than a certain amount. So just like wrap your brain around this. If you made less than $10,000, you did not qualify for some of these. It was designed for, it was directly tied basically to this idea of work. And if you're not producing something, then we sure as heck don't want to take care of you, kind of mentality that is pretty consistent. That idea is a big part of like how a lot of our programs and systems are designed. So what happened with this expansion, it's an expansion of who qualifies, and it's also an expansion of the amount. So increase the amount per child. And then one of the most important additional things that it did is it distributes it. They basically distribute it ahead of time. So the tax credit that they did is for the 2021 year. Normally, you don't get your tax credit for 2021 until you file taxes in 2022, right? That's usually how it works. What they did here is they said, we're going to assume based on your last year's income that you're going to make somewhere generally around the same amount. And so if you would have qualified for this last year, you're going to qualify for it this year, and we're going to distribute it monthly to you ahead of time. So it's actually distributing in July that you're getting part of what would be your big rebate in 2022. It's just getting doled out. And so what happened here is, that gets us to this guaranteed income piece, is that it's a monthly check that you can start to rely on month in and month out. You can start, now sadly, this was only for 2021. That was part of what was passed for the American Rescue Plan. We think that as a really important first step towards universality that is talking about is, let's make this permanent. Let's make this child tax credit permanent. Let's make sure that it's monthly checks that are going out to these millions of families. And then let's use that as the first milestone towards getting closer and closer to universality. So the next piece might be, let's expand the earned income tax credit so that people who don't have kids start to get something like the child tax credit, and if we want to talk about means testing or whatever, but there might be ways for us to build on a roadmap for us to build on existing tax structures or existing systems to start just getting more and more money out to people. When you give money to people, you get people invested in that. If you think about Social Security right now, when people really start talking about let's cut Social Security or let's stop giving checks or let's extend the Social Security age to 67, and people get pretty upset. People are very protective of their checks, right? You've been relying, we as a society, we are now we've become reliant on and doing our retirement planning based on these checks existing. So there is a benefit besides that we get money directly to people for guaranteed income programs, something like the child tax credit. Money gets out to people right away who need it, wonderful. It starts to help, it makes sure that the conversation around cash continues to be a big conversation that we have in our cultural and political spheres. And it also gets a lot of people to experience and become invested in the idea that direct cash is important and checks is where the government actually can be most effective. So there's a lot of really important benefits that come with something like the expanded child tax credit. Is it universal? No, it's not. Is it a long way from universal? Heck yeah, it is. But it helps us continue to have the conversation, and it is certainly an important step in the right direction.
I think it also, one thing I just want to add on to what Stacey said is another thing that the child tax credit does is it makes the assumption that the parent, I'm not going to use the word deserves, but the parent has a legitimate right to cash because they have a dependent and society will benefit from that parent having what they need, right? And it also makes the assumption, right, because like Stacey said, it assumes that, you're gonna be qualified. And compare that to the programs that we have now in the United States, even take food stamps, which is supposedly and is one of the better run programs despite its flaws. Consider that when you get food stamps, every 6 months, you have to be telling the state, reminding the state that you're poor. You have to send in a piece of paper that they first send to you that says, oh yeah, I still deserve this. I'm still broke. I don't have enough and I still qualify. Compared to the expanded child tax credit, which gives you the dignity up front of that this is not a handout and that you are qualified to get it and that you have a legitimate purpose and use for this money. I think that I'm hoping that people are going to start to make these comparisons, like really, really in a very vocal way, because what we really need to be, one of the things I'd like to see is to make sure that we're not, that when we make the comparison, we're like, wouldn't it be great if food stamps, I'm not saying like you need to choose one over the other, but wouldn't it be great if food stamps worked that way? That you make an assumption that the person is gonna, has a legitimate need for these food stamps, and you check in with them once a year, or maybe once every 2 years. Like, why are we making the assumption that a person that has a very low income, has to do paperwork every 6 months that could potentially knock them off of the program, which it always does, right? Well, churning. So
even better yet, why don't we just give extra cash to people instead of food stamps? I mean, we see over and over again, the way that the food stamps program is set up is that it doesn't take into consideration a wide range of food products that people need, and it doesn't cover diapers. It doesn't give people the flexibility to use that money in ways that they know they need to for themselves and for their households. And so, like, what I think, just piggybacking on what Diane is saying, like, there are people in our community, the larger basic income community, who talk about basic income replacing our current programs. And I think it's very important from income movement's perspective. That is not what we're talking about. We are not talking about a replacing of the social safety net. We're talking about a stacking on top of having the social safety net stack on top of guaranteed income. This is, and to build on what Enno is saying, this is not the program. This is the dignity of us as humans, that we should all have our basic needs met, and that the way to meet basic needs is through income, through money. So, and everybody deserves that. And then if in addition to that, people still can't cover some of their basic needs, they need to, because they live in an expensive city or whatever it is, that anything that stacks on top, ideally in our mind, should be cash also. You need an extra support for your housing. It shouldn't come in the form of a voucher that's only good at specific places. It's like, here's your extra $400. Go and live wherever the heck you want to. That $400 is going to travel with you wherever you go. Here's an extra $300 for food. So everybody might be getting their $1,000 or $1,500 a month or whatever it is that's part of their basic income. But there may be people who are getting additional monies to help them based on some of these ideas in our society that we should be helping fully cover basic needs, and that those might fluctuate or be different depending on what's happening in people's lives. So I just want to point that out, because there's a lot of people, a lot of the time there's this tension or anxiety that happens in the conversations around, like, are you going to make me choose? Are you going to make me choose between a basic income and my housing support? And everybody who's had to deal, I mean, I'm not even close to the expert that Diana is in this space, but I know that, like, the last thing you want to do is compromise your housing, and so these are the kinds of things that are going to need to be reconciled, that we need to be having these conversations around, so that, and to the point that I was making at the very beginning here, we need people on the ground who are having these experiences to help make sure that their experiences are dictating the design of the policy. We can't lose sight of the reality on the ground of what it means to be part of this cobbled together network of different programs, and then what it means to start to insert cash into that situation, and how all of those programs need to respond.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time, folks. So I'd like to go around and get final comments from everyone. It's been a fascinating conversation. I'll start with Ms. Blackwell. Diana, what any final thoughts or comments for our audience?
Well, I'm just, I've just gained some more knowledge, and I'm glad that I can see it now as a grassroots. I've gotten the educational perspective from but I'm now grabbing the grassroots part from Stacey. So I think I can actually put it together now. So it's really great. It was a great one.
Mm-hmm. Diane, Pagen, any final comments or thoughts?
I would just say that, yeah, we really want people to be thinking about what cash can do. And in addition, I wanted to just point out that we are having an event in September. It's the third annual Basic Income March, and the name of the event this year is the Basic Income Celebration, and it is going to be in Harlem. Stacey, do you think that we can be more specific about the location yet in this recording?
Yeah, so you can go to basicincomemarch.com, and at that website, you'll be able to see the latest and greatest information. You'll have a link to all of the different cities who are participating in the event pages, so you can sign up, register to participate, and you can start getting emails and updates and things like that. So if you're listening to this and you've been and you're curious and excited and interested to see what this is all about, September 25th, we will be starting in Morningside Park and marching up Amsterdam Avenue to the kind of Hamilton Heights area of 143rd and Amsterdam Avenue. So we're going to be out in the streets. We did this in 2019 pre-COVID, and we had, I think, about 1,000 people marching. We'll have a great rally afterwards, where you'll be able to hear more from local advocates, grassroots community members, people, elected officials who are doing amazing work in this space. And so we'd love to see you out there. If you go to basicincomemarch.com, you can sign up and get all the information.
Okay, great. And Enno Schmidt, you got the last word, Enno.
Well, about the word deserve, in 2017, the House of Representatives of the state of Hawaii agreed and decided to start studies about the basic income in Hawaii. And the statement in Hawaii has been, everybody deserves an economic security and life and dignity. So the word deserves came up in Hawaii. And I think, well, that's okay. You can say that. This is 21st century. We need more flexibility, and we need and consider the order. First, you need an income, then you can work. That's the order, not vice versa. First, you need an income, then you can live, then you can work. So an income is not after work. An income is to enable you to work. And after abolishing slavery, we are free to decide what we want to do for others.
Okay, that's quite profound. Thank you, Enno. This has been Community and Technology, a very lively discussion about universal unconditional basic income with my co-host, Diane Blackwell, Enno Schmidt. Thank you so much, guys and ladies. Special guests have been Stacey Rutland and Diane Pagen from the Income Movement. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been
wonderful.
wonderful.
Great. Thank you. This has been Community and Technology. Stay tuned for more news and information from WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. And be sure to tune in next week, every Wednesday, 5 p.m., Community and Technology. Thanks all. Good night.